Hello and welcome to today's TrainingIndustry.com's webinar, Emotional Intelligence Essentials, sponsored by Multi-Health Systems. I'm Leah Johnson, Market Research Manager here at Training Industry, and I'm so happy you could join us today. Before we get started, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items with you to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of today's program. Throughout today's event, please feel free to submit questions and we will address them throughout the program. We also encourage you to share the information you received today with your colleagues and network via social media. Please include the hashtag TIWebinars and Twitter handles at MHS_talent and at the Langley Group so we're able to track your contribution to the conversation. When the program ends, you'll receive a short evaluation survey and we greatly welcome your feedback about the content, speaker, or whatever you would like to share. As always, today's webinar will be recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you'll be receiving a follow-up email from us that will include a link to the on-demand program for you to share with your team. Finally, should you have any technical troubles today, you can send me a chat message, or you can reach out to Citrix Tech Support, whose number is bolded in red on your screen. They will be able to help you far better with any technical troubles than I will. If this is your first webinar with us, a special welcome goes out to you. At trainingindustry.com, we offer dozens of webinars each year on subjects ranging from the economy to entrepreneurship, innovation to change management, sales training, just about every topic relevant to leaders of training organizations around the globe. And if you have attended one of our programs in the past, thank you so much for joining us again. Now to get started, please let me introduce you to today's speaker, Sue Langley. She is the CEO and founder of the Langley Group. Sue is a certified master trainer of MSCEIT and EQI 2.0, two of the leading emotional intelligence tools, a speaker, global business consultant, researcher, and advisor on the practical applications of emotional intelligence, positive psychology, and neuroscience. Her gift is synthesizing science into simple, practical tools anyone can use. Sue has taught thousands of leaders, HR professionals, and coaches how to be more intelligent with emotions, create positive work cultures, and inspire people to be the best they can be. Sue has a master in neuroscience of leadership and presents her work at conferences internationally. Today, Sue will explore the science of emotions and how to use them intelligently to improve personal and leadership effectiveness. Sue, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Leah. It's lovely to be here and to have so many people on the call this morning. I have to admit it's morning here in Sydney. It's a glorious morning and it's lovely to be kicking off talking about emotions and emotional intelligence and how they work. So I believe I have control of the slides, although they don't seem to be moving. Here we go. So this is our introduction of really what we're going to be talking about over this session, and there will be a couple of interactive exercises that I will ask you to just type in your chat window and respond to so that we can sort of have a bit of a play. But we're going to look about why AI matters, the MSCEIT framework, so this is the Mayer-Salovey-Caruso Emotional Intelligence Test framework. It doesn't matter which framework you use, there are plenty of EI frameworks out there. As Leah mentioned, I do master training for both the EQI and the MSCEIT, and a couple of other sort of tools and strengths tools as well. But it's useful for just exploring that perceiving, understanding, using and managing emotions piece. We'll look at each of those mean very briefly, although we've only got an hour, so it will be brief, but there will be a couple of little exercises that we'll do throughout. As Leah mentioned, my background, I have a degree in psychology. I studied positive psychology at Harvard, and I actually have a master's in neuroscience of leadership. So for me, I bring those three things together. When you look at the science of emotional intelligence, neuroscience, and positive psychology, I don't think you can pull the three apart. If you want to understand emotions, then understanding the brain is very important. If we look at positive psychology, it's about how do we leverage well-being and the best in people. So really it's about, everything we do is about the practical application of these three tools. So I'm going to share with you a little bit as we go through the session about how these come to life. So one of the key things I talk about when it comes to emotions is I always talk about emotions as being data. And I think it's important to sort of understand that emotions are data. They're trying to tell you something, if you like, when you experience an emotion. because it actually takes the mysticism or the difficulty or the challenge out of emotions. People are often, nervous or feel vulnerable or, uncomfortable around certain emotions. And yet if we just remember that emotions contain data, it can help us understand and deal with them more effectively. And it also helps us to understand that this is the way the brain works. Our limbic brain is designed to be an emotional center around empathy and connection to people. And as many of you probably know, it's faster than the prefrontal cortex. It works more effectively when it comes to just quickly and experiencing things. It takes us a little bit longer to analyze and pay attention and think and make decisions. So we know emotions are there for a reason. And we can understand that it has an adaptive view, as in something happens, we experience an emotion, it brings our attention and our thoughts to it, and then motivates certain behaviours. And this could be anything, whether it's the example that I've sort of given here on the screen, or whether you're on walking safari in Africa and you see a flash of yellow in the vista of green, and you think, oh, quick, back in the Jeep. So all of those sorts of things, emotions have an adaptive view. They're there for a reason. And there's lots of research and theories out there around emotional intelligence, and it's worth thinking about the impact of training. And sometimes people are not always convinced that you can teach emotional intelligence. Sometimes people believe it's something that you're either born with or you're not. Personally, I started my business 15 years ago and called Emotional Intelligence Worldwide. And Emotional Intelligence Worldwide is still going strong after 15 years. It's part of the Langley Group. And we run all our emotional intelligence certifications through that. Now, I don't believe I would have stayed in business for 15 years if I didn't have a belief in the impact of training, as far as improvements in social behaviour, better understanding of emotions, being able to build those emotional management strategies or resilience, greater satisfaction with how we actually work and interact with people. So again, I personally believe that there is a lot of impact you can have around training. We know from a leadership perspective how important emotional intelligence is, and actually our ability to be aware of people's emotions in a leadership realm. And you'll find there's a lot of research, particularly using the MSCEIT, around leadership, whether it's in the healthcare services, in corporate, in sports. Leadership is a critical skill, I suppose, when we look at it, but emotional intelligence is one of those key elements of good leadership. And any of you out there who know or can think of right now of good leaders, effective leaders, I can guarantee you their emotional intelligence and their ability to be connected on a personal or emotional level is probably higher than those you would look to that you don't think are quite so good. And again, if we look at the research, this is just a quick synopsis of a few of the elements of research about contribution to psychological and physical health, mental health, and the importance of emotional support. There is a lot of research around this area of emotional intelligence, and I'm not going to go into a huge amount. One that we're collaborating with two PhD candidates at the moment, both in the military, are actually looking at emotional intelligence with advisors in Afghanistan, and it's interesting again seeing that actually the more effective advisors have higher levels of emotional intelligence. So this is really exciting, the people that we're working with that are doing this right now. So I'm not going to go hugely into the research. What I want to do is think about the impact that it has. So whilst this piece of research that you can see on the screen at the moment is another piece of research, what it actually looks at is the impact on leadership effectiveness of key areas. Now, IQ is the 15%. So this particular research, it isolated IQ, so people did an IQ test, and it found out that basically IQ contributes approximately 15% to leadership success, or leadership effectiveness, if you like. Now, because IQ tests have been around for 100 years, we can easily sort of take this into the mix. And most of us would understand that in order to be an effective leader, a certain level of IQ may be required. This study then used the NEO-PR, so the personality profile, the NEO-PR, around looking at the impact of personality on leadership effectiveness. And it did find there were certain things that were more effective and certain elements on the personality traits. For instance, and I'm sure this will make sense to you, people who were high on the neuroticism scale were not as effective leaders as those who were higher on the emotional stability side of that scale. So again, that had up to a 25% impact on leadership effectiveness. But the 38% is where I think it's really interesting. This was the impact of emotional intelligence on leadership effectiveness. And for me, I think this is a really powerful study because it looks at the fact that IQ, yes, we might be able to shift it a little bit, but it's going to take a lot more effort. Personality, if you want to try and change your personality, again, it's probably going to take a lot of effort. And I don't know about you, I quite like my personality. I'm not sure I want to change it too much. But emotional intelligence, not only is it the biggest chunk of 38%, but actually it's easier as a skill to develop. Now, some of you may be wanting to ask the question, what's the other 22%? Who knows? So as you know, unless we take a human being and put them in a laboratory condition for their entire life, we can't measure for everything. So this could be things like skills, values, motivation, background, history, a whole bunch of other things that also contributed. So that's one of the reasons why I spend in the emotional intelligence space. So I'm sure many of you know the background if you're interested in this space. Daniel Goleman wrote a book around emotional intelligence that became very popular, 95, 96, it was sort of top of the book lists, and it was based on Jack Mayer and Peter Salove's definition and paper back in 1990 that actually looked at emotional intelligence as a distinct ability. And Daniel Goleman included several other components. This has now been revised to 4 quadrants. But basically what happened is in those sort of early 90s, mid-90s, 2 different models of emotional intelligence tended to emerge. The ability-based model, which is the Mayer-Salovey-Caruso model, and the trait-based or mixed model, which includes the EQI, the Reuven-Baron EQI that was, and Daniel Goleman's model, and others. And again, if anybody wants to know more, then please let me know. So what does it all mean? So let's go on to the next slide. What I'm going to ask you is, I'm going to ask you to share your thoughts, and this slide is just to remind me around thinking about how emotions impact us. So this is time for you to explore what emotions mean to you. And Esther, I've got your question here about studies done on the impact on EI on academic success. Yes, there are some studies done around that. It's interesting that sometimes we can be highly successful academically and IQ-wise, but the emotional intelligence may impact your ability to actually get on in an academic setting, not just what you produce and what you research, but actually your ability to interact and connect in that particular setting. So I'm more than happy to share some tools, some studies with you on that one if you'd like to message me. So let's do our little exercise here. So on the screen you can see 3 images. The images don't really matter so much, but I want you to think about, if you can, you in your worst mood. So think about what you are like in your worst mood and send messages via the chat window of what you are like in your worst mood. So what are you like? How does it impact you? How does it impact those around you? And just send as many ideas as you can. Shoot through what you are like when you're in your worst mood. I'll wait for those to all start coming through and see if I can get an idea of some of the themes that appear. Okay, wonderful. We're getting some come through. Unfocused, unmotivated, unwilling to listen, anxious, build walls. Thanks, Greg. Love that one. Moody, sulky, angry. Thanks, Carol. Okay, we're impatient. Fantastic. Okay, give me some more here. What are you like in your worst mood? Wonderful. Impetuous. Fantastic. I love that, Elizabeth. Okay, we're frustrated. We're angry. Okay, good. What's the impact? Okay, Tamara, wonderful. The impact is you're unapproachable. Okay, so we need to think about not only what we're like, such as the impatient, anxious, frustrated, but also the impact on us and our performance, such as the building of walls or the shutdown. Thank you, Carol. That's a great one. And then also the impact on other people. So we're less approachable. We're not so willing to listen. I'm sure there's more coming through as I speak. So all of these sorts of things, brilliant, short-tempered. These are all the things that impact us or happen to us when we're in our worst mood. Patrice, I love that, snarky and critical. So as you hear some of those words coming through, the unapproachable, frustrated, argumentative, snippy, unrealistic, all of those words, less intelligent, think about them for a moment and think about how effective you think those words are to good leadership. Think about how impactful it is when you're in your worst mood, or when anybody's in their worst mood, on leadership based on some of those words that we've got come through. We're stubborn. We're better at critiquing. We can be defensive in our reactions. Think about the impact of that from a leadership perspective. Now, whilst I'm not suggesting that we can never experience a worst mood, it's fair to say that all of us at some point will experience a worst mood. So even though we can listen to those words and we can go, oh yes, that's not so good for good and effective leadership, we know that actually that's us at times. We will have those negative emotions, those worst moods, and it will impede innovation and close down and cause us to be selfish and destructive and damage relationships. We're not at our best when we're in our worst mood. So now let's switch it over then and think about what you are like in your best mood. So describe to me what you're like in your best mood. When you're absolutely in that best mood, whatever that positive mindset, whatever it is for you, again, type some words in for me and share with me what are you like in your best mood. And again, thinking about the impact on you and your performance or those of others, shoot through as many ideas as just chocolate. Thank you very much, Angela. Yeah, I want to know what you're like, not what you're eating. Okay, so happy, positive, funny, fabulous, thanks Matt, social. Absolutely, we connect to others when we're in our best mood, don't we? We're more likely to share and be open. And that unapproachable element that we talked about before, we're suddenly more approachable when we're in our best mood. We're more balanced. Thank you, Sandy, for shooting that through. So again, actually, we can think more clearly. We can be more aware. We can be more focused. Okay, we're agreeable. We're a good listener. Thanks, Joanne. Okay, connected deeper to myself and others. Thanks, Stephanie. I think that's really important, that we can actually be more connected when we're in our best mood. Hyperproductive. Thanks, William. So again, think about some of these words that you're hearing that I'm getting come through here. Happy, positive, funny, social, connected, excited, satisfied, connected again, productive, more connected to others. We understand what's important. Thanks, Matt. These are great comments. We're more creative and innovative. Fantastic. Thanks, Jeremy. So again, we can think about these words and think about the impact. If you listen to those words, think about the impact on effective leadership. And again, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting we can be in our best mood all of the time. But think about the impact of what we've just said around best mood, worst mood. Think about how impactful it would be if we could encourage leaders to at least spend more time in their best mood and less time in their worst mood. One of the things I talk about when it comes to combining emotional intelligence and positive psychology is emotional intelligence is the intelligent use of emotions. But if you think about where positive psychology comes from, it looks at the power and the impact of positive emotions. And so if we can think about how do we increase the duration and intensity of our ups, our positive moods, and how do we reduce the duration and intensity of our downs? Never once when we're talking about emotional intelligence are we talking about emotions being good or bad. It's something I always make quite clear when I'm doing any training program, is that there is no such thing as a good or bad emotion. Emotions are just data. They're trying to tell us something. They're giving us information. It's only what we choose to do with it that would be classified as good or bad. So I think that's an important thing to understand, that there's no such thing as good or bad when it comes to emotions. And if we can actually take away the stigma of emotions, it's actually so much easier to handle them if we understand that. And Carol, thank you for your comment. We can get more people to do more than they ever thought they could. I totally agree when we're in our best mood. All right, so let's look a little deeper into this then. If we refer you back to the slides and we'll have a look through. So the MSCEIT model that you can see in front of you is perceiving, using, understanding and managing emotions. Now I don't have time to go through all 4 of these in detail, and any of you who know the MSCEIT actually knows that it breaks it down into 2 further elements around each of these, so what they call task scores. But we're going to look briefly at a couple of things. The reason personally I like the MSCEIT is a couple of reasons. One is it is a bit of a gold standard from a research perspective because it is an abilities-based test. And when we get to the end, I'll sort of share with you a little bit more from a technical perspective of what that means. But let's get into what each of those components mean. So perceiving emotions, basically what we're talking about there is what emotions are you and others experiencing. Now that's really important for us to understand and be able to sort of pick up on what we or the people around us are experiencing, because it's giving us data. And the more data that we've got at our disposal, the more choices that we have, the more we can do something with it. Using emotions is basically how these emotions are impacting us from a cognitive perspective. Understanding is about causes and triggers and how they change and blend over time. And then managing emotions is about managing emotions in self and others. So that's our sort of 4 skills or abilities that we're looking at. But let's delve into them in a little bit more detail. So perceiving emotions, identifying how yourself and others are feeling, but also the data in the emotional context around us. So again, I can easily spend half a day, sometimes up to a day, actually exploring with people and training people on how to perceive emotions more effectively from a brain perspective, but also from a physiological perspective, both in themselves or, as you can see here on the screen, in others. And some of you may recall the TV series Lie to Me, which was so much fun, with Tim Roth, who you can see on the screen here, and actually exploring how emotions show up through microexpressions. And again, I think this is a really valuable skill to get to grips with, because especially those people who are working cross-culturally and things like that, microexpressions are relatively universal across cultures. So, for instance, if you look at the images there, there's not a single culture in the world where that 3rd image would be classified as happy. So microexpressions do have a universal component, even though the display rules across different countries may be different. So perceiving emotions is one area, and if we can get better at perceiving emotions in ourselves, there actually is a bit of a correlation that suggests we'll get better at picking them up in others and vice versa. Some people do ask about gender differences when it comes to emotional intelligence, and there's a few things I could share with you, but one I think is quite interesting when we actually look at the primary emotions. And when you think of the primary emotions, they would be things like sadness, happiness, fear, anger, disgust and surprise. Sometimes contempt jumps in there as well, but certainly the first 6 are the ones that all academic researchers tend to agree on. Those in particular, those primary emotions, they're classified as primary emotions because they have survival value, and they also have, as I say, universal across cultures. So if you think about what that means, it means that those primary emotions from a gender difference, there are some that women are better at, or 1 out of those 6 that women are better at picking up the early cues of, if you like, and some that men are better at. And again, I don't know if anybody's got any ideas here, but out of those 6 that I mentioned, and I'll mention them again, they are happy, sad, fear, anger, surprise, and disgust. Anybody got any thoughts of which one of those 6 men are generally better at picking up the early signs of, and which one are women generally better at picking up the early signs of? So I'd love to know if anybody knows the answer to this. Okay, Mark suggested disgust, but you haven't said whether it's men or women. Okay, Vasilios, fabulous name. Men, anger, you are spot on. Men in general are better at picking up the early signals, so the more subtle signals of anger, than women. Okay, women disgust, not correct, Stephanie. It's not disgust for women. And Sharon, you're spot on. It's actually sadness. So women are actually better at picking up those early cues of sadness than men. And again, we could talk about all the reasons why that might be. but I don't have time to go into that, so I'll leave you to have your thoughts, and if you want to message me privately, please do. All right, so let's have a look at then the impact on microexpression versus display rules and how they may play out. So whilst microexpressions tend to be universal, display rules can change based on different cultures. So, you know, whether you're experiencing different display rules in Japan, China, Australia, South American countries, North America, Spain, etc., there'll be different display rules based on those cultures. However, I'd also like you to consider that there are also organizational cultures around emotions. And so many of you might have worked for certain organizations where certain emotions are actually more acceptable to be expressed than others. And you can see a little graph on there, and this was a study done quite a few years ago by Sigel Barsade, who's done some really wonderful studies around emotions and the impact of emotions on organizational performance. In fact, if you haven't seen it, if you look up the study Why Affect Matters, so very, very good sort of research or meta-analysis report, which has got lots and lots of references to different, like 350 other studies into emotions. So have a look at those two graphs there. You can see anger and joy. Basically what was studied is how acceptable certain emotions were to be expressed within organizations. And what they found was that anger was acceptable. So when I say acceptable, I mean normal, as in, you know, you wouldn't be shocked by it. Anger was acceptable to be expressed in 53% of cases, whereas joy and happiness was only acceptable to be expressed in 19% of cases. Now think about the impact of that for a moment, and most of these were in the US, so most of these this particular study, a lot of the organizations were US based. Think about what that looks like. So you might be shocked by the figures for a moment, but think about what that really looks like day to day. You're sitting at your desk, happily working away. Someone to the right of you slams down their phone and says, God, why is it me who has to deal with all these people? I can't believe I have to deal with this same stupid question every day. And they're expressing anger. Now, in many organizations, you would look across and go, oh, poor thing, but you wouldn't be particularly shocked if someone expressed that level of frustration. In some you may, but in many you may not. In fact, it might be a daily occurrence for some of you. But then let's take 5 minutes later, you're sitting at your desk happily working away, and someone to the left of you puts their phone down, stands up and says, wow, I'm having such a lovely day today. I'm really enjoying my job right now. And do you know what? I'm feeling pretty happy. So think about that. How much more surprised would you be if somebody expresses that level of positivity and joy at work compared to the frustration? So Blanca, I think that is, sorry. She said, can you repeat? So 53% is more acceptable. So basically what that means is anger was found to be acceptable to be expressed in 53% of cases with the organizations they looked at, whereas joy and happiness was only acceptable to be expressed in 19% of cases. So what that means on a day-to-day basis is you are less likely to be shocked or surprised when somebody expresses frustration and anger and annoyance than you are if they go, wow, I'm having such a good day today, I'm loving my job, I'm feeling so happy today. And you're absolutely right, Bronson. It's about thinking about, yeah, we complain more than we compliment. But also thinking about that is linked to the brain. And I haven't got a chance to go into all the neuroscience. As Leah said when she introduced me, I do have a master's in neuroscience of leadership, so I could spend ages talking about the brain, but we do have a bias towards the negative. And even if you, and this is not us as or one of us as an individual, it's just how our brain is wired. We actually have more neurons dedicated to a threat response than we do a reward response. But even think about those 6 primary emotions that I just mentioned. If you think about those 6, and again I'll go through them: happy, sad, disgust, surprise, fear, and anger. Only one of those is classified as positive. One of them, surprise, is neutral. The other 4 are negative. Okay, so the question is it partly because organisations have been typically male and anger is more easily perceived by men and joy by women? Yeah, I'd love to think that may be the case, and I'd like to be able to take credit for being female in that regard. But actually, sadness is the one that's more easily perceived by women. There isn't actually a statistical difference in the perception of joy. So, but you could be right there, but I won't get into the gender differences on that one. All right, so let me continue, because I've got another exercise I'd love to ask for you to do in a moment, is the impact of using emotions. So using emotions is the ability to basically integrate our feelings into the way that we think. Now, most of us would understand that how we feel absolutely impacts our thinking. But what sometimes most people don't understand is that there is research that has given us really good clues of what emotional state is more conducive to certain types of cognitive tasks. So again, there are cognitive tasks that are we're going to be more effective at doing if we're in a neutral to slightly negative mood, versus other cognitive tasks where we'll be more effective if we're in a positive, higher energy mood. So again, I haven't got time to go into that one in detail, but you might want to think about that, of the emotions that you experience every day and how you can actually tailor your tasks to suit your mood or your mood to suit your task. And we will be sending you our emotional intelligence white paper after this, so that you can actually have a look at that. It does explain that in there in a little bit more detail. Okay, so the third one is our understanding of emotions. And this one I do want to give you an opportunity to do a little exercise around. So this is about our ability to understand the causes and complexity of emotions. And again, I can easily spend a whole day on this with clients sometimes, of understanding the rules around emotions, as in the certain triggers that emotions have. And again, they'll be cross-cultural, but there'll be individual differences as well. So if we think about the purpose of understanding emotions, if we can actually understand what triggers an emotion and the progression of emotions, then it actually helps us be able to predict how either ourselves or the people around us might well respond. So if you have a look on the screen now, you can see what's known as the triggers, if you like, the universal triggers of emotions. So whilst there will of course be individual differences, the triggers are generally fairly universal. So, for instance, generally people feel happy when they gain something of value or things go their way. Sadness, we tend to feel sad when we lose something, etc., etc. So if you look at the ones on there, you can see how certain things will trigger certain emotions. But you also have to consider the individual differences. So let's take sadness for a moment. Generally, human beings will feel sad when they lose something of value. That's the universal trigger. But the individual difference will be what that person perceives as valuable. So, for instance, you might not be able to understand why I feel sad because I've lost my favourite pen, until you understand that my favourite pen was given to me when I was 18 by my nan, who has since passed away, and I've had it for 20 years. If it's just a pen, it's just a pen, is no value, I'm not going to feel sadness. But if I value that pen, if I've got a strong connection to that and I value it, then I'm going to experience sadness around the loss. If we think about anger for a moment, anger is basically something's getting in my way, whether it's someone or something. Now this could be all sorts of things. This could be me getting irritated at work because I've got piles and piles and piles of work on, and I am basically being blocked for getting it all done, because just as soon as I do something, more appears. You know, you're my boss and you give me more to do, and I wanted to try and get out of here on time today because I've got somewhere to be. I've got, you know, one of my children's got an event or something like that. So I'm feeling blocked and I'm getting irritated. But the other thing that's interesting about this understanding emotions is not just the trigger, but how they progress. So again, if we stay with anger for a moment, if the thing that's blocking me, whatever it is, that's getting in my way, doesn't get removed, I will continue down that path. I will continue down the path of anger, and my anger will intensify. Now, think about that for a moment. If I don't have a level of emotional intelligence that understands where that trigger is or what that trigger is, then I may not even notice until I'm a 10 out of 10 on the anger scale that I'm, in a particular state. And this is why perceiving emotions tends to come first, because I've got to be able to perceive it, but I also need to be able to understand where it's coming from. So just to explore this, I thought we might have a bit of a play with it. So if you look at the screen in front of you, you'll see some words coming up. You'll see 8 words there. You'll see anger, mad, frustration, irritation, furious, annoyance, upset, and enraged. My question to you is, can you put them in the order of intensity? So imagine a ladder of intensity with the least intense at the bottom and the most intense at the top. Can you put them in an order of intensity? So each one of those 8 words, and again, if you want to type in the chat window, in the message window, and see if you can put them into a ladder of intensity. And this will give us a clue of where we start, but also the progression of those emotions if the thing that's blocking us doesn't get removed. Now, please bear in mind the thing that's blocking us that often causes anger could well be ourselves, because sometimes we do actually get in our own way. But I'm going to look forward to seeing some of your answers come through here. So what do you think? What's the order of intensity in those 8 words? I'll wait to see what responses we get. Even if you start us off, what do you think? What's the ladder of intensity from least intense to most intense? Okay, we've got annoyance, irritation, frustration, upset, mad, anger, furious, Mark. Very nearly, Mark. Very nearly, not quite. Shannon. Oh, very nearly, Shannon. You've only got 2 the wrong way round. Serene, not quite. Okay. Sarah, you're very close. A couple not quite right. Okay, Randy, not quite. Oh, I'm waiting for someone to get it spot on. Not quite, Amy. Oh, you're very close though, very close. All right, let's see if we've got Barbara, Cassandra, not quite. Cassandra, you are pretty close. So Cassandra, you've got 2 round the wrong way, but otherwise the other 6 are spot on. So, all right, Brenna, I think, no, you've still got a couple round the wrong way. All right, so we've got a few more coming through. Nearly right, Monica, nearly right. Okay, so I'll give you a clue. The first 3 are irritation, annoyance, frustration. So several of you have got those in the correct order. Irritation, annoyance, frustration. Now you might find one of those words you use more frequently than others, but yeah, irritation, annoyance, frustration are the first 3, and Tammy, you are spot on. It then goes upset, anger, mad, furious, and enraged. So think about that when you see those words, irritation, annoyance, frustration, upset, anger, mad. We can actually see that intensity increasing as we go through those words. And again, it's very rare for people to jump from neutral to enraged in a second. It can happen, but it's only in the more extreme circumstances. For most of us on a day-to-day basis, we actually don't even notice sometimes those earlier signals of anger. We tend to talk about the straw that broke the camel's back, which is when one small thing happens and then suddenly we lose it. But actually, potentially, we've been going down that path for a period of time and we're already potentially in that annoyed or frustrated end of the spectrum before that next happens. So I've got one more for you because I can't leave you with anger. I've got to leave you with a positive one. So see if we can have a crack at this one. So again, we've got 8 words on the screen. This is the happy end of the spectrum, and obviously there's more words than this. But you've got happy, ecstatic, pleased, joyous, calm, amused, positive, and content. Anybody like to have a crack at this one? What do you think? If you were to put those 8 words in a ladder of intensity, what do you think you would get? And I appreciate you can't see everybody's answers. Mel, calm would be the first one, so well done. So we're starting with calm, excellent. All right, give me some more. Calm, content, pleased, amused, positive, happy, and ecstatic. Well, it looks like we are pretty much there, although you've missed a word out, Vasilios. So add for me joyous, and you'll be, I think, spot on. What else have we got? Calm, content, positive, pleased. Not quite. Those the other way around. Calm, content, pleased does come next, not positive. Okay, so amused, sometimes people want to put higher because you feel that there's some sort of laughter in there, but amusement is more that just sort of warm little feeling where you're having a little bit of what I think of as a titter, but you're not necessarily laughing out loud. So what have we got? Calm, content, pleased, amused, positive, very close to Tara. But your joyous is in the wrong place. Same as summer, your joyous is in the wrong place. So the actual answer, see if it comes through. Erin, you started well. Okay, your actual answer is calm, content, pleased, amused, positive, happy, joyous, ecstatic. So most of you were almost there. So beautiful. Thanks, Sarah. That's perfect. So some of you got that right. Well done. Some of you are almost there. But again, the purpose of whether you got it right or wrong is not really the point here. This is the academic answer. The important thing is how we use the words that we are experiencing around our emotions, and can we understand that there are different intensity levels. I have people in my life who use the word happy to cover all sorts of things. So they'll go, yeah, I'm happy. And for me, that's barely registering on the content end of the spectrum. But equally, some people might use content as an overarching word. But you also have to understand the intensity levels. You can't stay ecstatic for long. Same as you can't stay enraged for long because they're such high energy emotions. It's actually way easier to stay irritated for a long period of time because it's lower energy. It doesn't burn itself out, if you like. So again, think about that piece around understanding emotions and how we can actually use that to help us. All right, I know I only have a few minutes left before we take a few questions at the end. So the last one that I won't spend too much time on, but it's about managing emotions. And this is purely about remembering that emotions contain data and information, and actually being able to integrate that data, that emotional data, to figure out strategies about how we're going to do something moving forward. So how are we going to manage ourselves moving forward? How are we going to manage other people? Now again, program I ran yesterday, I was running a Flourish program, which is a one-day emotional intelligence program focused mainly on resilience strategies and how we actually manage our own and others' emotions. And the key thing here, it's not about suppression. So it's not about controlling or suppressing emotions. It's actually about understanding that emotions are data and how are those emotions serving you. And if they're not serving you, what can you do to actually manage your own or others' emotions in order to get an effective outcome? So again, this is easily a full day where you can actually explore all about how emotions are managed. And you'll all have some of your own strategies about how you manage emotions. They might be very proactive, general well-being ones, such as good diet, exercise, meditation, mindfulness practice, those sorts of things. Or they might be reactive ones when you're feeling angry in a meeting and you take 6 deep breaths to try and calm yourself. Or maybe you're like me, you use your Wonder Woman pose if you're feeling slightly tired or anxious or something, and you practice your Wonder Woman pose. And again, if you don't know the research around the Wonder Woman pose, please send me a message and let me know, and I'll send you through some details. All right, so a couple of things then just to sort of bring this all together and think about how we're actually going to use this, because I'm sure some of you are very much in the sort of emotional intelligence space, and you're actually, sort of understand this sort of stuff and how you actually use it. So if I look at the next slide, what we want to have a look at is the different types of assessments that you might use. So me personally, I've used all of these on different occasions. And obviously MHS are the publisher of the EQI 2.0 and also the MSCEIT. But basically I always think it's important, if you are a practitioner in this space, that you do actually understand what it is that you're measuring. So I mentioned before that the MSCEIT is what's known as an abilities-based test. Therefore, it's a similar premise to an IQ test. So for any of you who have ever taken an IQ test, never on an IQ test will you be asked to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 7 of how intelligent you think you are. What will happen on an IQ test is you will be given cognitive problems to wrangle with, and you have an answer. And that's basically how the MSCEIT works, is instead of cognitive problems, they're emotional problems that you wrangle with. But it's based on that premise of an abilities base. Then you have trait-based tools, such as the EQI 2.0, and that sees EI as a set of traits, if you like, and these are dimensions. So you have things like self-regard, you'll have the self-awareness, you'll have things like optimism, and they even have, which I really like, a sort of a well-being indicator, which brings together 4 of the components. And these are trait-based, and it's what's known as a mixed model. So we have pure models, which the MSCEIT is a pure model, and then mixed models, which is the EQI, as in it mixes other elements such as optimism, which is a trait, and it's not strictly emotional intelligence. So it's what's known as a mixed model. And the EQI comes as a self-report or a 360. Then you've got things like competency-based tools, which is the ECI or the ESCI is a common one of this, and this is the Goleman-Haymack-Burr model that some of you may be familiar with, because certainly the book was written around this. And this sees EI as a set of competencies, and basically what you put in as your demographic in the beginning will give you an indication of how competent you are. And that's really interesting from a leadership perspective, in that it can be quite confusing sometimes. So when I answer it, let's imagine around organizational awareness, I get a score of 3.7 and I'm deemed competent, and you, on the other hand, get a score of 3.9. You could be deemed not yet competent, simply because of the demographic that you put yourself into when you first choose your leadership level. So you have to consider that when you're doing that, and again, it's a self-report or a 360. Then you've got other tools such as behavior-based tools, and again, an example of this is the Genos EI tool. It's again a pure model of EI, and it sees emotional intelligence as a set of skills, and basically looks at how frequently you demonstrate particular behaviors. And again, if we look at that, it's a self-report or a 360. And the reason I'm sort of sharing that with you as self-report and 360 is so that you get an idea of what you're actually measuring. There is not necessarily one better than the other, it's what you're actually wanting to measure. The only challenge you have from a self-report perspective is that sometimes we're actually not that good at reporting on our own abilities. So I have got 2 questions there, and I will answer those in a moment. So if you look at these particular graphs that you can see on the screen at the moment, the one on the right, the green one, this is actually people's rating of their own IQ. So basically being asked a question, how intelligent do you think you are, and rating themselves, versus their scores on an actual IQ test. And you can see the actual correlation is 0.17. So basically we're not that good at rating our own intelligence. Some people will overrate, some people will underrate. Interestingly, the exact same correlation was found versus on the MSCEIT using self-rated EI versus the ability-based test using the MSCEIT. So again, we're not that good at rating our own emotional intelligence. And it's just important to understand what we're actually measuring. So many tests are a self-report. So all the other ones I mentioned, with the exception of the MSCEIT, have a self-report. So for instance, I might suggest my athletic ability is a 5 out of 10. I might put myself there. Then you've got the other rating, I guess, which is your 360. So my boss, my peers, my direct reports, they get to rate me. And maybe some of them see me as far fitter than they are, so they might rate me as a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10. There might be somebody else who's a bit of a marathon runner who sees that I don't actually do that much at all, who might rate me as a 2 out of 10. And then we've got the performance, the actual performance, and this is my actual athletic ability. So this is where you put me through my paces on the athletics field and you test me out and you see actually how fast I can run, throw, whatever it happens to be. And this is the difference between any of the other tools and the MSCEIT tool out there. So MSCEIT measures your actual performance. The other tools measure self-report and a 360. All of them are valid. Actually understanding how people perceive you and how you come across in the workplace is a critically important element. But again, I just want you to understand, if you are a practitioner, what sort of test you actually want to use and how you're going to use it. So I've got a couple of questions that have sort of come through as I've been talking that I will see if I can cover. One of the short questions is, if you take the MSCEIT in a bad mood, does it affect your results? Yes, Dana, it will. Same as any other test. Any other test that requires some sort of reporting, self-report, I'm in a bad mood, I underscore myself. I'm in a positive mood, I might overscore myself. Generally speaking, when you look at the across-the-board impact of mood on ability or performance in tests, generally it's no more than about 10 percentile points. So whilst it does have an impact, we don't want to use it as a complete excuse, as in, oh, well, I would have been an expert if I'd have been in a good mood. But yes, it will have a small impact. Okay, so Marvette, thank you for your question about the over and under rating depending on gender. Not necessarily. Certainly from a stereotypical perspective, we often find that, but I'm sure many of you who've used actually 360 tools in the past, you've probably found a real mixture of people going both ways depending on whatever gender you are. And again, it could be contributed by a number of different things, not just gender, but role in the business, confidence in the business, your mood, your abilities, but also your understanding. So one of the things that I've found over the years, particularly when doing master training for some of the 360 tools around emotional intelligence, is when people fill in the assessment beforehand and they complete it on themselves, so when they do the self-report piece, they may score themselves relatively high, because often people coming on a master training or a certification course obviously are coming on it because they're really interested. By the time we get through the 3 days and people have actually got a feel for what the depth of emotional intelligence is and the breadth and the information, a lot of people often say to me, I would actually score myself lower now, because actually I've realized that there's a lot more that I don't know. So this is the interesting thing as well. It's actually based on our perception, so not always gender. And then Mark has a very good question as well. Have I seen a rise over the last few years with a much higher lack of EI in managers' organisations? It's more data-driven based on metrics. Look, to a degree, Mark, but I have to admit, our business has gone from strength to strength here in Australia, and we work around the world as well. We have clients all over the world. And it was really interesting to me that during the global financial crisis, I had several people from other businesses, other consultants say to me, oh, you're going to be worst hit, you poor thing, not only are you doing soft skills, but you're, or not only are you doing training, but you're also doing soft skills. And it was really interesting for me. Since then, our business has grown more and more and more. So I think there's an interest in it because people are realizing that actually it is lacking and we need to do something about it. The thing that I will say is there is some research that indicates it does need improving. So one longitudinal piece of research I read recently that was a 10-year study based on social media use. Those that had the highest social media use actually exhibited less empathy in the brain than those who had lower social media use. So I think there's a variety of things that are actually contributing, but again, it will depend on the area of emotional intelligence that we're actually looking at. I think there's a lot we can do, I guess, is what I'm saying. I really see people, when they learn these skills, make a difference with them. But you've got to give them the practical, not just the theory. There is no tool that by itself is going to cure anything. It's only the conversation that can be had from it and then what the person chooses to do with it. And one of the things we try and do, and we do this on our certification courses as well, is we try and make it really practical and bring it to life. So we produce different activities and tools and cards and things where people can actually play. So a bit like the intensity ladder that you guys just had a play with here, we have them as cards and we actually sort of play with them so people can do it there and then. All right, there's a few more questions. Can I clarify ability versus behavior again? Yes, of course. So basically my ability from an emotional intelligence perspective, if I just take perceiving emotions for a moment, let's imagine you show me a picture of a face, they express a micro-expression and then go back to neutral. My ability will be, can I pick up what that expression was, what that emotion was that came through on that micro-expression? Behavior will be how frequently people see me demonstrating that I've perceived their emotions. So this is the distinction again between different tools. Ability-based, like MSCEIT, will tell you if somebody has the ability. Then a 360 will often tell you if somebody's actually seeing that ability put into practice through someone's behavior. And again, different organizations prefer different ways of measuring. Okay. Thank you, Tara, for your question about the Superwoman pose. The lady's name that you need to be looking for, her name is Amy Cuddy, C-U-D-D-Y. She's a researcher at Harvard, and she's done some great stuff on what she calls power poses. Sometimes I don't like the term power poses because it kind of makes me think that people just want to have power over people. But we talk a lot about the Wonder Woman pose and actually using it because it actually changes the chemical makeup of your body. So within 1 to 2 minutes of standing like Wonder Woman, hands on hips, feet flat on the floor, chest up, chin up, what actually happens is your cortisol levels drop, your testosterone levels increase, and from a positive emotion perspective, you're actually producing dopamine, which is what your brain needs in order to function well. So I love my Wonder Woman pose. I practice her every day. Okay, is there good current data that shows causation between high EQ scores and leadership effectiveness? Yes, there is. Randy, thank you for that question. And again, the study that I mentioned earlier actually looks at that high EIQ scores and leadership effectiveness. I'm guessing if you just Google EI and leadership effectiveness, you'll probably find some. But certainly we do refer to a few studies in our EI white paper. And again, if you can't find any, just shoot me an email, just sue@langleygroup.com.au, and I'm more than happy to send through. All right, there's a few more questions. Sorry, Leah, I know I'm nearly running out of time, but there's a couple more questions. As we discussed universals, I generally get questions about how individuals on the autism spectrum fit. Okay, I'm going to come back to that one, Amy, because it's a really good question, but I'll just cover these quick ones. Do you think the decline in controlling emotions is generation-based, Jamie? Okay, so yes, potentially, and this is just opinion, but I don't think it's necessarily about controlling. I think we've tried to make emotions comfortable. I don't know what you feel in different parts of the world, but I think probably in the more Western world, we like to be comfortable. We don't like it when we get hot and sweaty and we're not in our air conditioning. We've made negative emotions, what would traditionally be called negative emotions, difficult. We want to fix them. So a child experiences a negative emotion and we want to make it better. We want to make it go away. We want to improve and fix. And whilst that's admirable, it's actually telling the child that the negative emotions aren't good, aren't useful, they shouldn't be feeling them. It's making them bad, if you like. And I think because of that, we're actually then not teaching children to perhaps manage their emotions more effectively. And if I give you an example, gardening. When I was a child, my granddad used to have a garden in England, and when he would grow seedlings, he'd put little what's called cold frames over the top, little glass frames that he would place over the top of the seedlings to protect them from the cold weather. However, when they got to a certain growth point, he would take the cold frames off. So the little glass frames would come off and they would be exposed to the weather. Even if they were still quite small and, you know, likely to die off, they needed to get the harshness of the weather in order to grow. And I think that we're potentially stopping that sometimes and therefore not helping people deal with emotions. All right, last question. The Superwoman study is Amy Cuddy, C-U-D-D-Y, but I'm coming back to this Asperger's. The one thing that I will tell you on here is people on the autism spectrum, such as Asperger's or all the way through, when it comes to micro-expressions, have a look at the facial action coding work. I know in the US in particular, there has been some great work done with children with Asperger's and autism, where they're actually teaching them all the muscle movements of the micro-expressions, because they're not picking up them generally in what's known as sort of the normal way. They need to learn them from a more cognitive perspective, and it's a really cool way of helping children on the autism spectrum actually be able to recognize emotions more effectively. So I think there's something on there, and I know I'm almost out of time, Lee. You kindly sent me a message. So I would love to answer any more questions that you have. Please feel free to send me a message or an email at any point in time, and more than happy to help. But thank you, Leah, for looking after me, and I know you want to say a few words to wrap up, so thank you everybody from me, and I'll hand you back to Leah.
Oh, thank you so much, Sue. I appreciate it. Just a few quick things from me. I'd like to invite you all to attend some of our upcoming webinars. To sign up, please go to trainingindustry.com and choose the webinar tab. I'd also like to invite you to be more involved with training industry. You can become a certified professional in training management. We have several practicums coming up. One in February, there's a virtual session, so you can attend it from anywhere in the world. And we also have one in Orlando, Florida, and one in Dallas, Texas. And I would like to thank Sue Langley once again for speaking for us today, and our sponsor, Multi-Health Systems. Thank you to all of you for attending today. I hope you have a great rest of your day wherever you are.